Greetings, programs and users. It is time once again for Old Nerds Drinking. I'm John Patrick, the Master Control Program. With me once again is Rojan.
Greetings, people.
And we are old nerds, and today we are drinking on this most auspicious of occasions.
Yeah, what is this?
This is the 1-year anniversary of Old Nerds Drinking. Not exactly. It was.
Aren't we a little off by
a
week or two?
We're a little off by a week or two, but this was about this. This will be the first time we've recorded in the time period of us having our 1-year anniversary.
Damn.
As such, I have pulled from the vaults the absolute last of the Johnny Walker Blue Label.
I've never had Johnny Walker Blue. I'll give it a shot.
This is scotch that is old enough to order its own scotch.
Ooh.
No, not yet. I think this is 18-year-old scotch.
All right. I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, this is like $300 a bottle scotch.
Damn, I can smell it. It's rich.
Oh, it's so good. So,
that's smooth.
oh yeah.
That's really smooth.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a smokiness to it, but not overly smoked.
No, and it doesn't burn at all. It's smooth. It tastes of like you're getting the smokiness of it. You're getting like a little bit of the wood. No peat, which is the thing I hate the most about certain scotches, is the fact that some scotches taste like you're drinking bog water.
I've had smoked scotches and smoked bourbons before. High West makes a smoked bourbon that it just tastes like you're drinking liquid smoke with alcohol mixed with it.
Yeah, no.
Not a big fan of smoky stuff that's that strong.
That is not an enjoyable experience at all.
No, this is good. This is really good.
Mm-hmm.
I do like this better than that super high alcohol bourbon you gave me the one time that I had to actually dilute, and you damn near cut off my testicles for it.
Yeah, because you diluted it with
It was too strong.
Carbonated peach flavor. You put a few drops of water in it to mellow it. That's fine. I'm not gonna hate on you for that. But peach flavor.
I drank it though.
Oh.
I finished drinking it. I didn't. Let it go to waste.
Didn't, because I had to dump it at the end of the night.
Are you sure? I swear.
I am 100% sure. That's how I knew you mixed it with peach.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't, because I didn't want to get so buzzed that I couldn't drive home.
Yeah.
So, the other thing that I'm drinking is the, as you called it, Arnold Palmer spiked. The half and half. What you called it, swill, which I'm not totally disagreeing.
It's not that it's swill. It's swill compared to what I had intended for us to drink, which was the Johnny Walker.
Yeah.
This was the legend of this bottle was the fact that I bought it at an estate sale for $90.
Yeah.
Still in the cellophane, still sealed up.
Wow.
Yeah, and normally this is a $350 bottle of scotch.
How much you pay for it?
I just said $90.
Damn.
Yeah, so that was my estate sale deal of the century. And I had taken it to cons, shared it out with some select people at cons, and I had just a little bit left in one of my I had decanted it into my glass flask and was kind of saving it for a special occasion, and this definitely qualified as said special occasion.
I just recently learned from a video on TikTok the purpose of an infinity decanter. And apparently, you probably already know all this. Apparently an infinity decanter is one of those glass bottles where you take the last so many ounces you have of something and you dump it in there. And every time you get down to the last so many ounces of bourbon or whatever, you dump it in there. And by the time it's done, you have your own unique blend of the stuff that you drink all mixed together. And everybody should have one, apparently. So,
interesting.
Yeah. So that glass bottle that I'm looking at over on the right over there, you should probably make that your infinity decanter. And if you have anything left, you dump it in there. And every time you get down to the last couple ounces, you dump it in there, and your last couple of shots or whatever. And then over time, it all mixes together and turns into, swill. Yeah, this is really good. I'm really enjoying this. This is nice. It's not too harsh.
I'm not a big scotch guy, but yeah, this stuff is. I don't know if I would ever go so far as to pay $350 for another bottle of it.
Man, $350 is a lot.
My normal break point on bourbon is $60.
Like the stuff that I could buy for $350, I could get a 3D printer and a couple of books. I could spend a whole lot of money on gaming stuff. I could buy a whole bunch of books for my show that I'll only read 3/4 of them, maybe, and put them aside.
Oh my God! So, One of the books I've gushed on here about is The Elusive Shift by John Petterson. And that's about how the community of D&D players influenced the creation of D&D over from the start of Chainmail till it became a role-playing game. To the point, it was not TSR that coined the term role-playing game for D&D. It was the community started calling that, and then D&D picked it up. So he had wrote another book that released like last week called The Game Wizards, that tells the story of the rise and fall of D&D, TSR, Gary Gygax, and Dave Arneson. And, oh my God, is it like some serious middle school two-kid drama between the two of them over this. If you really want to know the story behind D&D, this kind of gets into the the personalities and what happened between everybody. TSR, from it being one thing in Gary Gygax's house to them building their own facility in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And then it ends with the ambush at Sheridan Springs, the hostile takeover of TSR away from Gary Gygax, and all the steps that led up to that. But he wrote another book well before these two. One of his first books was called Playing at Worlds. And this thing is a brick. It's a tome. It was meant to be a college-level textbook looking at the evolution of war games and role-playing games from like the various early beginnings, and look at that with the critical eye of like a college-level textbook.
Wow,
they did one print run of it. And I have been looking for a copy of it.
Was that the one you said it's like super expensive to find everywhere?
Oh, yeah.
Something like that.
Copies of it routinely sell on Amazon, because you know how, like, if you ever look for an out-of-print book on Amazon,
they get super expensive.
You can find sellers selling them, but they're like $300.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was in that realm, and I have it as a saved search on eBay.
Yeah.
And because his new book came out, the old ones were selling, and they were selling pretty expensive. I had bid on one auction. I bid it up to $75, and I think the auction ended at $150. Yeah.
I mean, there's books that I'll buy for my show that are completely different topic oriented that easily go into that range, but a lot of them are tomes on various esoteric subjects, we'll say. And it's not unusual for me to see books going for $200-300 in the realm of the stuff that I deal with. But even then, I draw the line. Like, there's this, there's a book, oh God, I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's this really cool book on Nordic magic, and a brand new printing of it goes for about $325. And they're very finely crafted with leather, and, you know, like, I have a house that smells of many leather-bound books and stuff, but
my office smells of a rich mahogany.
Yeah, yes. Kind of a big deal. But I see those prices, and I'm kind of like, whoa. You know, I'm like, do I really want this book that bad?
So I had got an alert from one of my saved searches that a auction came up with a buy it now for this book that was autographed by the author for $100. And you better believe I bought that thing as fast as my fingers could take it.
Is this the big expensive book that you were talking about?
This is the biggest.
So you got it?
I got it.
When did this happen?
Last week.
I was going to say, because last time I talked to you, I don't remember if it was at a fire or not. You were telling me about this book before and how expensive it was and everything. I would like to talk to this guy.
I'm trying to reach out to him, email with him, and see if he can come on, especially after he just put out his new book. There's also another game author who just started a Kickstarter for a new RPG he's doing that I'm going to try and see if I can reach out to him to see if I can get him on the show.
It's a little bit different for me because I'm a little bit longer in the tooth than you are. Mm-hmm. And I started playing these games when I was like 12. I remember when you could walk into the local large chain store. Like, we have one called Meyer. And I remember when that store sold Dungeons & Dragons stuff. They sold Dungeons & Dragons books and things like that. And that was kind of like when it really started taking off. up until then, you had to find like really out of the way hobby stores and things like that to be able to find those books.
So it talks about that in the Game Wizards. And the reason that happened was because in the rise of TSR, they signed a distribution deal with Random House. Mm-hmm. And Random House gave them access to the big box stores, to the regular bookstores. And that was one of the things that pushed D&D from something that's just into the hobby shop into everybody's public consciousness.
Yeah, because we had to go to like really obscure, out of the way hobby shops to find this stuff. It was still very much you had to know where to go, and they were always these out of the way places and stuff. And that you'd find BattleTech and Dungeons and Dragons, of course, and then TSR. I remember they had this explosion of creativity, and you had games like Star Frontiers that come out, and Gangbusters, which was their mob role-playing game. They started coming out with role-playing games for every kind of environment. And then other companies started jumping on board and stuff.
And this book tells you the backstory of that, of from a business standpoint, what was going on, who was writing what they were trying to get to market at what times, the whole legal battle between Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax over what constituted D&D and who contributed to what. So yeah, there's some really fascinating stuff in this book.
It's cool you got it, especially an autographed copy.
Yeah, I know.
For the price that you did, too.
Yeah, that was super amazing. It's one of the more expensive books in my rare book collection, but I'm glad that it's in my rare book collection. I just like being able to say that I now have a rare book collection. That's kind of awesome.
It's just funny to think, like, we're seeing it now with Marvel and comic books and stuff because of the prevalence of comic book movies and everything, but all of this, like, geek culture that we grew up with. And again, I'm older than you are. I'm 50. I'll be 50 in May. When I was playing these games, you probably weren't even born yet, you know? So it's cool to see like the backstory of all this stuff that I grew up, because when you're growing up, you just kind of take it for granted. You're like, yeah, this is Dungeons and Dragons and these are cool little books and stuff like that. But then when you get older and you look back, you're like, man, there's actually a history behind this.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
And that's what's drawing me to it, is that I don't know if it's because now geek culture is so pervasive in regular culture.
Yeah.
But there is this movement to look at things like geek culture with the critical eye of a historian and go back and record the histories of it to preserve it for posterity.
Yeah.
Because especially with early D&D and with the book Elusive Shift, almost all of that information was recorded in fan newsletters or local role-playing group newsletter publications that just maybe 100 people got a hand-typed ditograph copy of.
Yeah, little booklets that were stapled together. Yeah.
And now there is a push to save those, digitize those, and make them accessible.
Yeah.
Like, now that I know that Bowling Green College has a library of pop culture where a lot of these things are stored, I really want to talk to somebody there.
We could make a pretty, because that's where the Dungeons and Dragons Museum is around there, isn't it?
No, Dungeons and Dragons Museum's in Lake Geneva, in the original house where the original TSR and Dungeon Hobby Shop were.
Yeah, so we could easily go up to Wisconsin and just do a total geek tour.
Yeah, except Bowling Green is not in Wisconsin.
No, but it's we could hit it, in that area. It's just it's one of the, like, we could make a road trip. What I'm trying to say poorly is that we could make a nice little road trip out of all of this.
Unfortunately, they used to do a convention in Lake Geneva specifically for old school D&D role-playing. It was called GaryCon.
Yeah.
And it was kind of after Wizards of the Coast took over D&D, and this was a push to do D&D the way it originally was. But Ernie Gygax, Gary's son, took it over, and
kind of a douche.
Yeah, he's kind of a douche.
From what I've read.
Yeah, he's been doing some douchey things lately, and it kind of has pushed a lot of people away from GaryCon. So we'll see how that plays out.
That was where Gen Con... I think I went to a Gen Con, God, when I was in my early teens. I had to be 14, and we went with a bunch of buddies, and my mom was like, yeah, go ahead and go. Looking back, I don't know how the hell my mom... Yeah, I'm sure, son, go to Wisconsin with a bunch of people.
Oh, yeah.
And we got kicked out of the hotel because we bought a whole bunch of Jell-O and dumped it into the hot tub. Or I don't remember if we got kicked out or not. I don't remember. I was a kid. I was just like, yeah, sure, whatever. And it was, I mean, it's not what Gen Con is now, but...
No, and it was... Gen Con was held in Lake Geneva till I want to say 87.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
87 or 89 was when it outgrew the facilities in Lake Geneva, and they had to move it to Milwaukee.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that were pissed about that when it happened. And once it went to Milwaukee, I kind of lost track of it. I mean, I heard, rumblings and stuff as I was growing up, because you grow up and you have kids and life happens and shit. And then... after the kids started getting grown up and stuff, I got back into RPGs and tabletop gaming and stuff. And I got back into it at 3.0 Dungeons & Dragons is what I got back into.
Well, to bring this full circle, when Wizards of the Coast launched D&D 3rd Edition, was one of the last years they held Gen Con in Milwaukee. I went that year. As a promotional thing, they invited Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson back. And I think that was the first time they had been back to Gen Con in many, many years. Because basically after the whole ambush at Sheridan Springs, Gary Gygax was just done with D&D. He ended up even selling his stock in the company back to TSR and completely divesting himself of Dungeons & Dragons.
Yeah. It's one of those, it's like the story of Apple computers. It's one of those kinds of stories. And that's what's cool about it, because you don't realize when I was a kid, it was just a game, And then we started playing with Marvel, my love for the original Marvel superheroes game.
Yep.
Face Rip. And when I look back at it now, over the years, I look back, and now that I've played many games over the years, I look back and I'm like, this is kind of a stupid game, but it's still fun to just sit down and just play a battle between superhero teams or what have you.
Right.
But all those games and stuff were coming out. You really didn't think about it back then. You're just like, yeah, there's this cool company. Here's all these games. Like TSR was my youth for many, many years. For a long time. That was my escape. We would get together on Thursday nights or Friday nights, and we would sit and play like Temple of Elemental Evil or BattleTech or the original Gamma World. The Gamma World was a TSR game. All of those old school original games and shit. And then you just don't really think about it.
I found myself maybe in my 30s kind of being that kind of douchebag gatekeepery. And then I had to take a step back and be like, no, dude, it's great. And
this is what we wanted when we were younger.
This is the dream. Although I still fucking hate Pokemon players.
Deckers. I remember going to the convention, and you had the guys in the hallways playing Magic the Gathering and so forth. There was this divide of people playing card games, because that was when Magic was breaking big.
Oh yeah, I remember. I was there.
And you had people over playing Magic, and I remember like the tabletop people in the game like they were like the Magic players were kind of looked down on.
Well, it's funny because like we used to have the ladder of nerddom, and like the people who thought they were the pinnacle of the ladder of nerddom were like the historical war gamers. Those were the old school hardcore.
Those people are still weird.
Yeah. Trust me, I go to miniature conventions and interact with these people, and they are hardcore.
Yeah.
And then below the historical war gamers, you have the regular war gamers.
Yeah.
Then below the war gamers, you have the RPG crowd.
Yeah.
Below the RPG crowd, you have the card gamers. Below the card gamers, you have the LARPers.
I gotta wonder, I think Pokemon Pokemon was the first real game, and then you had Yu-Gi-Oh! And stuff like that came along, but Pokemon was kind of the game that was that generation's game that brought them into, Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. Once they started playing Pokemon, then they discovered other games and stuff that went along. And Magic also had something to do with it, but I think Magic players were like the old D&D players.
Yeah, until maybe like... Because it was weird. Like Magic was kind of like the college coffee house crowd.
Yeah, that was the upper level of the card game people.
Yeah, until about 5th edition, and then at that point, Magic had exploded and was really trying to broaden its appeal.
Yeah.
So they took out a lot of the more risque artwork. They added subtle things to the cards to make them more user-friendly. And in a true douchebag moment, that's when I said, fuck it, man, this game's not cool anymore. I'm done.
Well, I remember when Magic changed their artwork, And there was a big hubbub about that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
About the artist being, and the artwork being changed, because they'd used the same artist for years, and then all of a sudden they were like, nope, we're changing all the artwork now, we're changing the way we pay everybody. And there was a big kickback from the community of people like, what are you doing? We've grown up with this stuff in this game, and now you're going and changing everything, and you're commercializing it and so forth.
Yeah.
But Magic was well on the way to being commercialized at that point anyways.
And then the Pro Tour came, then it came to... from one set a year and one expansion to now it's 2 base sets a year, 2 expansion sets a year. So by the time you've just figured the set out and you know the cards and you've got your deck, here comes a new set and everything changes. So it was just, the rules were always in this constant state of flux. Games Workshop didn't even do that until... I would say Wizards of the Coast probably did it first, and Games Workshop learned it from them. Yeah,
I can't agree on that, but that's a good one, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll agree with that.
Yeah. I remember, but going back to the Pokemon players, I remember distinctly standing in a very long line to get Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson's autograph, and these kids come up, and they're like, what's this line for? Oh, it's to meet Gary Gygax. Who's that? It's like, get the fuck out of here, you little Pokemon.
Well, they're kids.
It's like
they probably got there eventually, But you knew that, at least I knew. It's different for me because I'm older. I'll say that again. But I knew that we had arrived when Gary Gygax's floating head arrived on Futurama. It was like, wow, it's like, here's something major, a major cartoon, a television show, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And then, and here's Gary Gygax's floating head, and it's actually Gary Gygax being paid tribute to.
And that's kind of the point of contention, was that Dave Arneson was always kind of the silent partner of making the D&D rules. He wasn't a very outgoing guy. He wasn't a very gregarious guy, but he came up with the idea of, hey, let's take people and run them through dungeons. Mm-hmm. He created the first dungeon. He created the idea of your characters gaining experience and getting better the more things they did. Mm-hmm. So he created a lot of the solid concepts for what we understand as D&D. But he was very much an idea guy. He was a guy who would have a ton of ideas, like 100 pages of notes, and then Gary Gygax would take that, edit it down, rewrite it, make it an understandable product that you could publish into a book.
Yeah, but that's how good companies work.
Right, exactly.
Now the problem comes when each person doesn't get their due credit or whatever.
And that's what it started to be. It was Arneson started to resent that more and more Gary Gygax became TSR. And as he became the public face for TSR, it became Dungeons & Dragons, published by TSR, written by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. Then it was Gary Gygax, TSR, and then very small, and then on the first page in thanks, it's, rules also written by Dave Arneson. And it was just jealousy that Gary Gygax...
I understand that.
Yeah, it was jealousy that Gary Gygax became the public face of D&D. And as the media took notice of D&D, it was never Gary Gygax, co-creator of D&D. It was Gary Gygax, creator of D&D. Gary Gygax, father of role-playing.
Yeah, but is that so much Gary Gygax's fault? Because he was the one... Like, if they had both gone out there... I'm sure if the other guy had made himself more prominently known and done more interviews and put himself more out there, like it's like this show, like me and you, this is your show. I'm here for you. So
because you can still be in the spotlight and acknowledge your co-creators.
Yeah.
But Gary Gygax didn't do that. He fell in love with his own image, and he fell to the dark side of the Schwartz.
He started buying into his own stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He started.
That's dangerous.
He started getting high on his own supply, and that was what, in the end, lost him the company, because he wasn't a good manager. He was a good writer, but he wanted to be in control. He wanted to be the one at the helm. He wanted the prestige of being able to say he was chairman of the board, that all decisions had to go through him, that he was the one, and that's, in the end...
Kind of like here, huh? No, I'm kidding. I really am kidding. I am. I've got my own spotlight to deal with, so I'm not... Yeah. But, see, it's the backstories and stuff like that you never think about when you're 13 years old, rolling up a cleric, a half elf cleric. You don't think about all of that stuff, and then, boom, later on, it's all what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when Gary Gygax actually passed away. I think there was something Gen Con did. Everybody did something special for him in the gaming community. And I remember Gen Con did something special for him, and I can't remember exactly what the hell it was. So anyhow, let's fast forward to what's going on now with the other guy. This tells you how bad I am. I can't remember the guy's name right now. I'm already slipping on his name. But so, where's he stand in the grand scheme of things? Is he finally getting his recognition now, or?
Well, there was a lot of lawsuits, and he basically gave up.
Because this sounds a lot like an Apple Computers kind of situation with Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs and, all those kinds of situations.
After the lawsuit, they did have to settle that they had to make, his name as co-creators of D&D. They had to pay him royalties on everything D&D because the basis of the game was rules that he helped design. Mm-hmm. In time, especially after Gary Gygax left TSR, they kind of tried to mend their friendship to the point where Wizards of the Coast brought them both in together again at Gen Con. Fortunately, they both passed right about the same time, but a lot of what he wanted was recognition of his peers, and a lot of his peers definitely knew his place in the standing.
Yeah.
And that's what it was, is he felt that by not getting his credit, it hurted his chance to do other work, which was one of his big complaints.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally get that. That doesn't sound surprising to me at all. He should get his credit or whatever. He should be recognized for what he did.
Although I will say there was a anecdote they said where there was an award show one year put on by Origins or Gamma, one of the other entities, and it was after he had split from TSR, but before the lawsuit. And they were giving away awards, and D&D won a couple of awards, and what happened with one of them was for best role-playing game. He ran up there, took the award, and because he was one of the creators of D&D, so he should have it, and then just held on to it and never gave it back. Because he felt if they were awarding for the game, then the person who created the game, not the publisher of the game, should get it.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I can see that as well. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a little childish, but, at what point do you take sides? I don't know.
And then that's one thing with the book. It's like, you wanna feel compassion, and you wanna be like, oh, I can see this, but then you realize they're both just terrible. They're both childish. They're both just like two schoolyard bullies. Or I shouldn't say bullies, but two schoolyard rivals who are trying to get their friends to, Arneson in interviews called it the Great War. And he was constantly thinking about it as a war and trying to manipulate other people in the industry against Gary Gygax and to, pull people away from TSR and doing all this, really kind of 12th grade drama. You know what, though? I've been in situations where I've had to deal with things like that, so I can relate to it. I get it. I do. I really do. But I don't know, man. You just let it go, I guess. Did you want to move on to Dune? Because we've got a lot to talk about. Oh, yeah. So, we both did on... not opening day, but the day after, Friday, we both did finally get to see Dune in the theaters. Mm-hmm. And it was exactly as glorious as all the hype had led it up to be. This was the treatment Dune deserved. Now, I will preface... I will slightly disagree on that, but I'll get to it. Hold on, because first we're going to preface. Dune has been published for over 50 years. There are no spoilers. It's like The Hobbit. You can't spoil The Hobbit. By the time the Hobbit movies came out, the book had been written 70 years ago. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if you don't know the story of Dune, if you don't know the story of the movie, fuck you at this point. Whoa, okay. Yeah, no spoiler alerts. It's already been spoiled. Yes. It was, oh my God, like everything from the cinematography to the costumes to the sets to the the CG of the locations. It was just gorgeous.
It was a very beautiful movie, and I'm very glad that I watched it at an IMAX. When I was at IMAX, we saw it at...
It's their big...
Yeah. We saw it on the best screen we could without going to IMAX, digital and everything. And it was an absolutely beautiful movie. I rewatched it, part of it with my wife tonight, and I said, do you understand now why I wanted to go see it at the movie theater? And she said, yeah, because like the starships and stuff, everything's just massive scale.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to see it on the big screen to truly appreciate it.
Also, I have to say, I am fucking loving the idea that it's on HBO Max, because since, in addition to seeing it at the movie theaters, I've also watched it at home twice.
Yeah, I'm halfway through watching it at home right now.
And douchebag move on my part, even though we had agreed to go see it together.
Yep.
Thursday, the day before our movie showing, as soon as it dropped on HBO Max, I watched it.
I am flipping off John right now for people at home.
But I had a very specific reason, was because I wanted to be able to watch it with subtitles. Especially nowadays, my hearing isn't as great. So sometimes in movies, you'll get where the background noise is really fucking loud, and then the characters are talking, and it's a very, very quiet talk, and it's like, what the fuck are they saying?
And there was a couple of points in the movie where the music there was things going on, like when they first arrived on Arrakis, the background music and all the stuff that was going on almost drowned them out sometimes. And there was a few times in the movie where I'm like, what? And I had to pay real close attention to what was going on. And when me and my wife were watching it tonight, she kept moving the volume up and down at certain points.
Yeah. So that was why I wanted to watch it beforehand with subtitles, so I could get all of those subtle cues out, and then just watch it and kind of not have to listen to the exact dialogue, to just kind of be able to take in the spectacle of it. And I think that really helped.
It was everything that I wanted it to be. They could not have picked a better director to do this movie.
Yeah.
It was not, because I've already seen two versions of. I saw the original David Lynch one, then I saw the Sci-Fi Channel one, which I did like both of them, but I liked them both for different reasons. And then this came along, and there were things in, like the other movies where they tried to make it direct from the book to the movie as much as possible. And it just doesn't work. Some of that stuff just doesn't work in the movie. Like in the original David Lynch one, I remember going in the movie theater and they handed you a pamphlet with all of the terms and all. I'm like, we get a fucking book on the way into the movie? I'm like, what the fuck is this? And then when they did the Sci-Fi Channel one, the Sci-Fi Channel one was done as a miniseries. And it was better, but they really didn't show like Paul's home planet with all the water and stuff. They alluded to it was a water planet and stuff like that, but they had the budget constraints and so forth. But again, they tried to do another direct from book port to movie, and it just doesn't work. Whereas this movie, they altered what they needed to alter to a point to where if you weren't a Dune aficionado, like if you weren't a super Dune fan like us who've read the books and have seen all the incarnations, if you were somebody walking off the street, like they made it to a point to explain what the Kwisatz Haderach was, but they didn't dwell on it. They brought it up, I think, once or twice in the movie, and they briefly, real quickly, that's what this is, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And they moved on.
It's the same thing they did with the most recent incarnation of Spider-Man. Yes, we all know the Spider-Man origin story. We've seen it before in movies. We don't need to retell the Spider-Man origin story.
We don't need to see Peter Parker getting bit by a spider again.
We don't need to see Uncle Ben dying. And that's one of the things I noticed about this. You see Thufir Hawlett, and it's mentioned, I think, that he's a Mentat, but they never tell you what a Mentat is.
Yeah, I had to explain that, and I had to explain what the Bene Gesserit were to my wife. But they do explain in the movie what the Bene Gesserit were. Right after I explain it to her, they make it a point to explain it. But they never explain what a Mentat and stuff is that I know of.
They never... I will say they didn't explain what Dr. Yue was, that he was a Suk school doctor, and why it was such a huge deal that he was the one who betrayed the Duke.
Yeah.
Because it was impossible for them to betray their charges.
Yeah. But a lot of that stuff, though, they did away with it very well.
Right.
You didn't need to know that backstory to still enjoy this. They did a very good job of editing out what they could to keep the movie flowing to somebody who wasn't. They explained what they had to explain. They did a good job of explaining it. I did like the guy that played Paul a lot better than the previous incarnations of Paul. He really did seem like he was a kid, but he was very smart.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was lost in all the other movies was that Paul was a kid.
Yeah.
It's a big deal that he's taking this on as essentially a 15-year-old or 16-year-old.
Where they stopped the movie at was a great spot to stop it at, because there's a time jump that happens in the book where a couple of years later he actually goes out and he has kids which get murdered by the Harkonnen and so forth. Because there's a big point in the book where for years, the Harkonnen come back and the Fremen are fighting him and stuff. And then it just picks up later on in his life at that point where he's more established with the Fremen and so forth. Because when he comes back, he's going to be more aged. He'll be more of the age that he was in the books, where the book picked back up the time jump.
Where they cut it isn't where the time jump happens.
I know, I get that. So I'm wondering...
There's still a lot of stuff that has to happen before the time jump.
I get that, but I think that stuff has already been filmed and is waiting there to be used. That's very clever editing. So... but it would make sense that they did. Well, another thing is, where do you cut? You're already in 3 hours in at that point. So what point do you cut this?
Yeah, I actually think they cut it at a good part.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's definitely a turning point of the story. Is it goes from them basically just fleeing Arakeen and into the desert to now they have been accepted by the Fremen. Now they are part of the Fremen Sietch, and then from there, it's not the story of him fleeing; it's the story of him becoming
a leader.
Yeah.
See, the thing about this is my only thing about Dune is sci-fi did it in one aspect. They did it right, where they made it a miniseries, and for them to properly, in my opinion, to be able to tell the Dune story properly, it needs to be something like a Game of Thrones kind of thing, where it's done in multiple seasons to really get the full effect of the story, because you have multiple houses, there's all kinds of backstory, there's things that they could weave into this, but it needs to be a longer format, because, like I was telling my wife, you can't really do Dune in a span of one, even two movies. I question, they might need three, but I can see why they don't want to make that story into three movies. Can it hold people's interest that long? Again, as I said, there's no spoilers here. Everybody knows how this story goes.
Right.
Whereas if they were to do it as like a Game of Thrones, Westworld kind of miniseries where it has seasons and it tells the story more in depth, they could do it closer to the book and still tell a much more enriched story. But this is all we're going to get. And they did the best they could, I think, with what they had. Like, everything about it was solid. There wasn't really much that I didn't like about it. I liked the updated, like the ornithopters looking like dragonflies were very cool.
I have exactly one complaint with the movie.
Yeah, you were mentioning that, but you never talked about it. We said to save it here.
Yeah, save it here. Is that I don't know if it was a specific decision by the director or the actor, but oh my God, what the hell was going on with Jessica? Like, every scene, it's like she's on the verge of tears. She's having a mental breakdown. The camera cuts away, and then she's like a stone-faced killer. It's like she spent half the movie, especially if you watch the subtitles, it's like Jessica weeping, Jessica sad, Jessica weeping. It's just like, she's not like that in the book. In the book, she's very calculated. She weeps for Leto when he dies, and she's concerned when Paul has to kill Jameis. But like for the rest of it, it's like, oh my God.
I don't think she becomes more calculated until she joins up with the Fremen, from what I remember.
No.
I will reserve judgment on that opinion until the next movie comes out, because if she's still that way, then I'll probably have the same bitch that you do. I'll have the same gripe, because the way that they did the movie, it shows the impression. Again, we're different. We know the story. I read Dune like every year, every 2 years. I'll go back and reread that book, and I'll read Children of Dune. I'll read the first three, and I'll go through the whole thing. I'm actually listening to the Bene Gesserit book right now. I'm listening to it on audiobook, but I'll go back and listen to them and stuff. And like what they're doing in the movie, okay, I'll grant you this. You are right to an extent. Where in the movie they're trying to portray her as, oh shit, I fucked up. I was supposed to have a daughter and I have a son, and everybody's pissed at me, and it goes against everything that she's ever been taught. They've all, they drilled into her head, have a daughter, and she decides to have a son. And Whereas the other two movies, they were like, they pinned out, you did this because you love your Duke.
Right.
In this movie, they really don't address that. They just say you had a son, and they make it sound like you had a son because you thought you could produce the Kwisatz Haderach.
Right.
Whereas in the books, it was like you had a son because your husband wanted a son. Why did you do that? Fuck what your husband wants. This is what we want, you know?
Right.
But, not to cut you off, there is one line in the movie that kind of redeems it, because he's talking to Jessica, and he says, I'm not talking to Jessica, I'm talking to the Bene Gesserit. Will you take care of our son? You know, and because he knows what's going on, he calls her out on it. And I was like, that was pretty cool, because that wasn't in the book, and that wasn't in the other two movies.
Because...
like, her husband knows what's going on, but he's like, are you going to look out for our son?
Because that's one of the big side plots in the book, is the fact that nobody knows... really, nobody knows that Dr. Yui was the betrayer.
Yeah.
Because Baron Harkonnen kills him right away.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want anybody else to know that the Sook School people can be... Turned.
Yeah, the only reason he was is because they had his wife.
Right. So, in the original book, everybody thinks Jessica's the traitor.
Exactly.
To the point where Duncan...
almost kills her.
Duncan tries to kill her.
Yeah.
Gurney tries to kill her. Thufir starts working with the Harkonnen because he's that pissed off at Jessica and working against her.
I think they'll gloss over. I think the only one is I think you're only going to see that again when what's his name shows back up.
Yeah, when Gurney shows back up.
Yeah, when Gurney shows back up. I think they're going to do it with that, but the rest of the stuff they'll leave out of it, because it's like, all right, we've already got one person that's pissed off. How many people do we need? They'll edit that out to save time. Because it'll still send the same message.
Oh man, can you imagine when we get the 4.5 hour director's cut of this?
You know what? It's got to be out there, because there's scenes that were in the previews that weren't in the movie where Paul's talking to.
Oh yeah, when he's talking to
the head Reverend Mother,
Gaius Mohiam. The Reverend Mother Gaius Mohiam.
Yeah, and he's like, well, my father's rich. And she's like, well, he's going to lose that planet. He'll lose that planet, too. That was cut out of it.
Yeah, my father rules a whole planet. He'll lose it. He's getting a more powerful one.
He'll lose that one, too. Yeah, that wasn't in the movie at all. And I'm kind of bummed that wasn't in there. So, you know that there's got to be other stuff out there. Mm-hmm. You know, you just know that there is. And when that hits, I'm definitely going to be buying it and watching it. So,
oh, yeah.
Sorry, I can't be bothered for the next 3 days. I'm watching Dune. It'll be like the extended cut of Lord of the Rings, because there is that fandom there for it. You know, if they come out with it,
Yeah, that reminds me. I have not sat down and watched the extended cut of the Lord of the Rings in a long time. I should do that one of these days.
What's funny is when they made the extended cut of The Hobbit, and it was like, you've already taken a book and stretched it out ridiculously long. How much more can you make an extended cut of The Hobbit, and why? You've already put so much bloated stuff into these movies.
When I worked at the hotels, I made a bet with somebody that when we were going to sit down, and that I could read The Hobbit faster than he could watch all 3 movies back to back. Because I think the original The Hobbit's only like 250 pages.
It's not a big book.
Yeah,
no.
It's not a big book.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
But the other thing about the movie I did notice is, unlike other incarnations of it, we don't see the Emperor. We hear him mentioned a lot. We have conversations about it, but we don't see the Emperor in the first movie, whereas in the previous incarnations, you saw the Emperor real quick in the story.
But in the book, you don't see the Emperor till he shows up at the end.
Yeah, well, he's mentioned again, stuff like that, but you also have, like, there was the arena fight with the Baron Harkonnen's younger nephew, the one that Sting played in the movie.
Oh,
Fayed?
Fay Routha.
Yeah, we don't see him in this movie, whereas in the other two incarnations we see him pretty much because it was Sting, of course.
Right. Well, and in the book, Fay Routha is like very early in the book. Like you see him plotting with Baron Harkonnen.
Yeah, and there was also the banquet where Paul meets the Emperor's daughter. And they didn't do that in the David Lynch version, but they did that in the sci-fi version, and that also happens in the book. They briefly meet at the beginning, because that's how Paul knows who she is. Because he mentions it in the last movie. He's like, well, I'll tell the Emperor that I'll marry his daughter and give him an heir to the throne, because he doesn't have an heir to the throne. They're like, he doesn't care about that. He wants you dead.
Right.
So, but that's how Paul knows about the Emperor's daughter and so forth. But they kind of edited that out of the movie, too. Again, it's clever editing, and one of the reasons why I think they did it is it's also good storytelling. Like in Star Wars, you had characters that showed up in the second movie and characters that showed up in the third movie and so forth. So when the second movie pops up, then these new players are going to come into the game, you know?
Right.
So it all around, it was very wise decisions in re-storytelling, and I'm happy with what they edited out, and I'm happy with how they retold the story. Like there was another line in there where he's like, I'm not in the mood for fighting right now, and he says moods in the book and in the other incarnations of the movies. He says, well, moods are something for lovemaking and horseback riding. They didn't use that same terminology in here, but he's like, no, you got to fight now, or I'm going to beat your ass, you know, that kind of a deal.
Right. Or when he says, I'm not in the mood for it, play a song.
Yeah.
Because alluding to that Gurney Halleck always is playing the guitar and singing songs.
Yeah, and we never saw that at all. And here,
I will say, I didn't expect it.
The Balisette, I think it was called?
Yeah, the Balisette.
Yeah.
But I was totally on board for Atreides bagpipes.
That was cool. That was like, cool. Now, the other thing that freaked me out was, what was up with, like, you didn't, like, the bullheads. I don't remember the bulls being, the House Atreides and the bull being in the books at all, and I don't remember it in the previous incarnations of the movie whatsoever.
Oh, yeah. That's a big thing. It was in the main hall of the Atreides is one side of the dining room was the portrait of Leto's father.
Yeah.
And the other side was the head of the bull that killed him.
See, I don't remember those, and I don't remember any of that in the books, and I don't remember it in the previous incarnations.
Yeah, he died bullfighting because I think in the originally the Atreides were supposed to give off more of like a Spanish Portuguese vibe, but then they made the choice here to go very Scottish, and like I said, I'm totally down for that. But yeah, so it was Leto's father died in a bullfight, but he had the head of the bull mounted, and it hung in the hall right across from his picture.
You also didn't see, you briefly saw them, but you didn't see the Spacer Guild. Like in the other movies, they had the big tank that comes in with the floating slug inside of it. You didn't see any of that. You did see the spaceships, but you never got to see them fold space or whatever. Just boom, the ship was there, they're leaving it. So I was like, that kind of bummed me out. It would have been cool to see them folding space and stuff, but again,
I think they did, but you just didn't catch it because the ship is a giant like tube.
Yeah,
and in one of the shots, you look through the tube of the spaceship, and it looks like there's a different system on the other side.
So the tube is the ship. Okay,
yeah, like the ship folds space by you enter one side and you come out the other.
Okay. So the ship has to be two ships to be able. Okay.
Or just the ship exists temporarily in two places at one time.
Yeah. So they made a big deal in the other movies of showing them how they fold space and all that stuff, because there was a part in the book.
But they do. I believe they do show the spacers.
Well, they do very briefly when he shows up to say, "All right, you're taking over Arrakis," and they're in the tanks in the background, like the suits with the big, huge bubbles on them.
The hair, and that was so cool. Like him showing up in essentially bishop's robes, as the herald of the change and all that.
I don't recall it being quite that way in the other books either, or in the other movies either. I don't remember that happening that way.
And for the record, I'm already pricing out replica signet rings on Etsy.
Oh my God!
Fuck yeah!
Oh man, the whole contrast of the water planet versus Dune, they did a very good job of that. Like the space, there's so much about this movie. There's so much of the grandness that was was amazing.
To the point where the window, like when they're in the palace on Arrakis, the way the windows are, where it's this very long window so that air can come in, but the direct sunlight can't.
Yeah.
Or that it's a vertical shaft, so that the light only comes in when it's directly ahead, and then it's just kind of an angled light. The way there's those stone doors that close.
Yeah, we have to close the doors because the sun's getting too high.
Right.
And then Paul's just walking around outside. He's like, "Hello." He's like, "You shouldn't be out here. You're going to die of heat stroke." And he's like, "Yeah, what's up with these trees?" Yeah. That was the thing. That was one of the things I liked about this version of Paul. He was still. Like the previous version, well, maybe the Sci-Fi Channel, not so much, but the original David Lynch version, he just didn't seem like a 15-year-old kid. He didn't see, he knew, like, he was very, I don't, it just didn't seem right, you know, whereas this one, he was very smart. Like he called his mom out a couple of times, like right off the bat. He's like, yeah, I know what's going on here. I know you did this and blah, blah.
Right.
But he was still also very much a child and very curious, like the way he sat and like how he got his information and sitting and watching the holotapes and all that kind of stuff.
Right, which is also an ingenious way
of telling the story,
to give backstory to the story.
Exactly. So that's I thought I go back to, they did really clever things to tell the story without having, like in the original Dune where everybody was talking in whispers, like you heard their thought in whispers and stuff, and it was like, you know, I get it. It was David Lynch and it was weird and shit like that, but there was neat little ways that they told the story without forcing it down your throat or whatever,
right.
You know. But my wife would ask me a question, and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, blah 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 blah," and then like a scene and a half later, they would kind of explain what I just explained to her. Mm-hmm. The only thing I had to explain to her, like I didn't know if they explained what the Bene Gesserit were, so I kind of explained it, and then they actually did explain it, but they never explained what the Mentats were, and I had to explain to her there's a reason there's no thinking computers in here because a war against the machines took place and blah blah blah. Like the doctor thing, I didn't explain it to her. She just kind of figured out that this guy could put his hands on people and and do whatever, So. But again, it was very clever storytelling. The only problem is I could still see where somebody who's not as much Dune versed as we are, I was worried that people would go in not knowing any better would still have a hard time with this movie, not understanding everything that was going on in it. So because my was like, why are they leaving this planet to go to the desert one? I'm like, because they're in charge of it. It was put under their care, so they have to pack up and leave and go there.
I will say I was also kind of disappointed in Baron Harkonnen.
Really, I liked him a lot. I liked that version.
He didn't seem as menacing as previous versions of it, or as calculating. He seemed kind of bored with it.
He reminded me of Apocalypse Now. Do you remember Apocalypse Now? Do you remember Marlon Brando, the big, he was really fat, and he came across that way to me. And I think that we're going to see more of him in the second movie.
Yeah.
Where this one, they had to, because of the time constraints and the storytelling, they had to back off and let Paul's character develop more.
It seems like
Batista had it down.
Yeah, they make it almost seem like that it's the Emperor who is the person behind all these things, but in the books, it's Baron Harkonnen who set everything in motion and is using the Emperor's jealousy as a tool for him. Yeah, to
get rid of the House Atreides, because there's a big bloodline feud that goes back hundreds of years with those two families. Yeah, but again, because the Emperor's not present and they don't cover it that way. But again, me and you know that, but the average person that's not a Dune aficionado like we are, they're just going to go in and see it and go, okay, yeah, all right, well, the Emperor, because even in Star Wars, you didn't see the Emperor show up until, the Empire Strikes Back.
Right.
So that's kind of what they're pulling here. The Emperor is going to show up. I didn't mind the Baron, though. I don't know. I didn't mind him. I think he'll get his moment in the sun as time goes on. That's probably another reason why they didn't put the Emperor. They didn't want to overclutter it with too many characters.
Right.
So I think that's probably why they left it out and why they're doing things the way that they are. But realistically, I mean, did it ruin the movie for you?
No.
Yeah, it didn't ruin it for me either. I didn't really put a lot of thought into that.
Yeah. So, but I think this is a good point to segue into, because this is our 1-year anniversary special, and we were just talking about the characters. I think it's time to Muppet this movie.
Yeah, we did make a promise at the start of all this that we were going to do this with more movies, and we just haven't done it that much as we should have. So I'm coming into this dry. I had no idea that you were going to pull this card, so I'm not really prepped to do this, so I'm just going to go off the hip and see what I can do here.
Okay, I have some that may seem a little weird, but I think they're solid choices.
We have to have one human character, though, remember
right,
that.
So I have my human character is going to be Cheney.
And
I think it's going to make a little more sense when I tell you who's playing Paul.
All right, go for it.
Gonzo.
Oh, man. I don't know. I would expect the Kermit Miss Piggy thing.
Oh, no. There's a whole... Wait till you get to it.
Oh, man.
No.
Okay.
And
all
specifically
right.
because...
I'm on board for the ride. Let's go.
It subverts that. But like Gonzo is the one who's always trying to be better. He's the one who's always trying to be the best performer, do all these crazy things and schemes, but he's also very childlike at it. So it makes sense for him to be Paul, and then you could totally see like
I could see him as young Paul, but I can't see him as older Paul.
Him being the little young scared thing and like having these sweet moments with Cheney, and her being the real person. But then, because he does like all the crazy like motorcycle riding stunts and stuff, so then when he becomes Muad'Dib, then he's still like, now he's a badass. So yes,
I just can't see Gonzo as a badass.
Oh, I can't.
I can't see it, but okay, I'll respect that decision.
The only person I'm having trouble coming up with is Jessica, but that's just because there's not a lot of...
Oh, the female chick from the band.
No, what I'm actually thinking of is in the Muppet Show, there was a matronly woman who was the costume designer, and I can't remember her name.
I don't know.
But she was like the old lady who did the costumes, and I think she would be good for Jessica because she had that motherly instinct.
Well, there's only so many female Muppets.
Yeah, there is.
So who's gonna play the Reverend Mother then? The grandmother mother.
Oh, the Reverend Gaius Mohiam?
Yeah.
That could be Jane from the band.
I don't know, man. Jane's
Put
too
your
much of a
hand
hippie.
in the box, man.
Oh God! Now that you say it that way, but she's not. Jane's not bitchy like the way that that woman was. I don't know. I still stand behind my decision that she'd make a better Jessica.
No, all right, but
we'll agree to disagree on that one. But go ahead.
All right. Leto, Kermit.
Whew. I don't know. I don't see Kermit as being that responsible and putting that much presence forward. I'm not sure where I would probably put Kermit in the Paul position.
But
because Kermit can be the childish, but Kermit can also be the leader. So
until I tell you who's playing Baron Harkonnen.
Oh, Sam?
Nope.
Okay, who?
Piggy.
Piggy plays I
initially thought of her as
she's
Raban.
bitchy enough to do it?
Yeah, I originally thought of her as Raban, but then it's like, no, if I make her Kermit and like her jealousy over Kermit being with like Jessica, yeah, it's starting to sink in, isn't it?
I could see the gluttony aspect of Miss Piggy doing it, and I also respect the sex flip, the whole sex change thing there. I respect that. I could probably buy that. Yeah, because she's bitchy enough to be the Baron Harkonnen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I could see her floating in the air, rah, 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 yeah. Yeah, okay. I'm on board for that one. Yeah.
Duncan, Idaho, Animal.
Ooh.
The scene where Duncan's fighting in the hallway with the Sarda car and just Animal going ape shit. Yeah.
Yeah. But the dynamic between Gonzo and Animal doesn't quite work there.
Well, you got to remember it's a Muppet movie, so things aren't perfect.
I could see Animal being Raban.
No. Honestly, Raban, I have Sweetums.
Okay.
The giant monster guy.
I will, to bounce back to Dune real quick, I will say that Batista does add more life to that character.
Yeah.
By far.
It's so hard to believe how subtle he can be.
Mm-hmm.
Like just the idea of how much menace he can put into his persona with no words. And just that that shit kicker walk he can do. He really, really does have range.
He does. He breathed a lot of new life because that character was kind of boring before. It was just a fat guy that was the Baron's little cousin or whatever.
It was one of the Baron's nephews.
Yeah, it was one of the Baron's nephews. And it was kind of like, all right, whatever. And then when you see the head pop up on the platter, you're like, oh, but now because he puts so much life in that character, if they do the scene where his head pops up on the platter in front of the Emperor, it's gonna it's gonna feel more because he's got more life into that character.
Right.
Back to the Muppets though. But okay.
Thufir Hellet, Professor Bunsen Honeydew.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
For Gurney, that's where I have Sam the Eagle.
That would be a perfect fit.
Yeah.
That would be a perfect fit, yep.
Layet Kynes is going to be Fozzie Bear.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. My God, the sad thing is I'm envisioning these characters. I'm gonna get in front of the microphone. I'm envisioning these characters in my head as you're saying them and how they're gonna work. So, okay.
Now, I had two choices for Stilgar, and I'm still kind of flip-flopping, but I think the more I think about it, the more I think I have the right choice, is that Rolf is Stilgar. Because Stilgar is one of those guys who's he's not shown to emotions. He's a very even keel leader. He's very keeps his own counsel and speaks when it has gravitas. And Rolf kind of gives that off.
I'll agree with that. And I'll also say that the casting of Stilgar in this version of Dune is far superior to the other ones.
Oh my God, sure. Javier Bardem. Like, I read an interview with Jason Momoa, and he said the scene where Stilgar comes to see the Duke, he's like, I felt like the newest, greenest person because I am in that scene with Oscar Isaac, I'm in that scene with Josh Brolin, and I'm in that scene with Javier Bardem, and it's just like, holy fuck, do I not have the acting chops to be in this league?
You know what, though? Momoa did really, like, Momoa's okay. I didn't really care much in Aquaman because I didn't feel that he could be a lead character. But he did really well in this movie. Like, and the other thing is, like, you could tell that he really took it seriously and he was a hardcore geek into this movie.
So we've got Piggy as Baron Harkonnen, we've got Sweetums as Raban, and then as Piker, the Baron's Mentat. I have Beaker for him.
I was going to say Beaker would be great.
Yeah,
Beaker would be, and he would have to talk that way too. And everybody would know what he was saying too. Like, it wouldn't be.
But I'm looking at my list. The only person I didn't think about was I didn't pick somebody for Dr. Yue. I think maybe one of like the evil Muppets, like that evil dragon-looking Muppet. I think he would do it. He would do a good job.
Where do Statler and Waldorf fall in? Well, they would probably pop up in Dune too.
I was actually going to have Statler and Waldorf, like, as a pair, be the Emperor. But you'd have to have both of them. You know how in Muppet Christmas Carol they made Statler and Waldorf Jacob Marley?
Yeah.
So he'd be the Emperor. They would be the Emperor.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, that would work. Yeah, because they'd just be total assholes the whole time.
Right.
Yeah. The only thing I would leave Paul as the character playing Paul now. I would leave him a human. That'd be about the only thing I think I would change up in your thing. Because I really like the kid that plays Paul. He does a fantastic job with it. He would be the only human I would leave in it. But I think most of your decisions are pretty solid. I could see it happening that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would work. So, yeah, I can't think of, did we miss any of the major characters? Well, there's the Fremen ones, but we're talking about Dune 1. We haven't gotten into 2 yet.
The only other named Fremen is Jameis.
Well, there's the ecologist, too.
That's Layet Kynes.
Yeah.
So that's Fozzie.
That would be another good pick for me for Janice. Like the hippie, the hippie ecologist of the planet. Yeah, man. Spice grows here, man. Yeah. I'm not part of your war, man.
Yeah, that's not too bad. We could do Janice as Layet Kynes.
Yeah, that'd be a better fit for her, because I just don't see her being bitchy enough to be a Bene Gesserit, or the head of the Bene Gesserit.
Have Fozzie be the head of the Bene Gesserit.
Just have her dressed up in woman's clothing. Yeah. Playing a woman.
and just completely doing it like it's a bet.
What about one of Gonzo's chickens?
Oh no. You see, because it's going to be the mass battle scenes where you're going to have the Fremen fighting the Harkonnens. So you have Rizzo the rat was going to be my pick for Fade Routha.
That would be good.
And then all the Harkonnens are just going to be the other rats.
Yeah.
And then all the Fremen are going to be chickens.
That kind of works a little bit better.
Yeah.
I think that works a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I told you it makes sense.
That makes a little bit more sense that way, I guess. Yeah. That would be funny to see all the rats and stuff. So who would play Fayed then when Fayed comes along? I guess we'll just have to wait. We'll have to do this again when Dune.
Well, no, we just said Rizzo would be Fade Routha.
Yeah, that would work. Yeah.
Yeah, so that way the Harkonnen soldiers are all the rats.
Yeah.
And the Fremen are all the chickens. So I think this is a good place to wrap it up. I think we've rehashed this enough. Rojan, where can people find you?
You can find my show at projectarchivist.com. I will be firing up the microphones again next week for the first time in a few months. Things are starting to settle down a little bit in my life to where I can get back to recording the show. Yeah, you can find us at www.projectarchivist.com. I'm going on 13 years of doing that show now, I think.
You can find us at the Old Nerds Drinking Facebook page, the Old Nerds Drinking Facebook group. Come for the podcast, stay for the memes. Instagram, and I'm actually thinking about tinkering with TikTok for at Old Nerds Drinking. I'm John Patrick, the Master Control Program.
And this is Rojan. Peace out, folks.
End of line.
Over? Did you say over? Nothing is over until we decide it is. Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no!
German? Forget it, he's rolling.
And it ain't over now.
So, what's the plan? Take Hart, go to Mum's, kill Phil, sorry, grab Liz, go to the Winchester, have a nice cold pint, and wait for all this to blow over.
Might as well write them off. Let's close up the bridge. Let's get out of here. Close it up. Lights out.
Where are you headed, cowboy?
Nowhere special.
Nowhere special. I always wanted to go there.
We're going streaking! Yes!
All right, move on. Nothing to see here. Please, Pittsburgh. Nothing to see here.